Hi folks, Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and today I'm doing yet another installment in the Freelancer Q&A series that I have been doing for a while now. In this particular instance, I'm going to do, pardon me, one of the themes, or a common theme in this one, which is niche evaluation. I'm going through a backlog of content that people wrote into me on my blog, Dead Tech, over the course of a few months or years, I forget, it was a while ago now. But I had invited people to essentially write in with ideas for niches that they might want to fill. And the reason that started to happen is because I remember trying to explain how to pick a niche on my blog. And that's pretty tough to do. So I sort of had this idea of like, well, write in with ideas and I'll deconstruct them and offer my thoughts on those such as they are. So this is another one of those videos. In this case, I have the actual question up here, and I'm going to read through at least some of it. Really enjoying reading through your blog. Thank you. That's always nice. Input on a potential niche that I may have found. Taken on a business architect role at a smaller company under the COO. There's trying to, sorry, I'm trying to condense this a little bit so I'm not reading just like a lengthy email. Helping automate and standardize their approach to financial reporting to get rid of spreadsheets that are everywhere. It's impossible to track financial and sales metrics. So the charter here is generally implementing automation and such to get their accounting system to talk to the CRM, and it sounds like maybe there's a little bit more going on as well, but the general charter is, I'll call it like back office automation cleanup with a process component to it. And so the person writing in identifies this as a potential niche, doing this sort of automation, this sort of cleanup of these back office systems, and in particular, the relationship between bookkeeping software and the CRM. Getting to the point of nearly automating everything, and want to ask how me, Eric, would validate this as a niche to run with. Would you run discovery calls with VPs of finance at similar sized companies and ask if they are running into the same problem? When I Google CRM accounting integration, there are a lot of results, so perhaps this niche is already filled, but I'm not sure how to tell. So that's an interesting question. Basically summarized, is this type of back office automation, this cleanup specifically as it pertains to the accounting software and the CRM software, is this a good niche? Now, in contrast to maybe what some of the folks write in here with, yes, I think that you're in pretty good shape. I'll kind of go through what I see as the good and then also what I see as the challenge with this. But I definitely think this is on the right track because you're talking about an actual business pain here potentially. And you're also, you can probably credibly springboard if you wanted to do this as an independent, just having done a round of it as an employee. That's a good natural next step. I think a lot of people, when they leave full-time employment and they're thinking about what to do, it's kind of a hodgepodge of like automation activity. This is a situation where you can pretty clearly make the last employment you had the springboard for building a practice around this. I will also say, as a brief aside, given how much I have lived in Google and Google search results over the last few years, when you're Googling CRM and accounting integration, probably what you're seeing is tools, maybe Zapier or Workato, things of that nature, that are providing those types of automation from a SaaS perspective. I wouldn't let that daunt you. Because people who are searching for that are probably looking to either DIY something quick, how do I connect QuickBooks to HubSpot or something, or they're looking to install some tool that does it. What you're talking about here is going to be Googled and discovered in a slightly different way. So I don't think I would worry about those types of Google searches having a lot of results being a problem for you. You're not going to be competing with Zapier. I wouldn't worry about that. But let me go into a little bit here why I think this is a good start. Number one, you definitely have identified a pain. So if a smaller company is creating an entire role aimed at cleaning this up, they're obviously putting their money where their mouth is. So this is, as the saying from Jonathan Stark goes, an expensive problem. And that's clearly documented by the existence of your role itself. So somebody is clearly willing to pay good money for this. You also, in this situation, have established a fairly clear ideal customer profile, companies of the size that yours is, that are, maybe not particularly mature with this tooling and these processes. And you've also got an economic buyer within that ideal customer profile that is an actual potential check writer. So you're talking about VPs, you're talking about a COO. That is a person who is going to be willing and able to buy from you. So that is also a nice head start on what a lot of people might have. So you're in good shape, I think, out of the gate, but there is more work to be done here, I would say. So what's more of a challenge, or what's not as good right out of the gate, is process improvement via automation is sort of generic. So that in and of itself is going to be kind of hard to sell, because it's the sort of thing that everybody will recognize as probably, theoretically worth doing. But at the same time, it would be the kind of thing where it's kind of like so in my experience, a lot of software engineers, when they go off on their own, get really preoccupied with the cost side of the ledger in like, hey, if I automate, opening up the IDE and make that like 6 seconds faster, there's ROI because it saves money. And it's like, well, yeah, but probably so little over so long, nobody cares. And by the way, most executives are going to be aware that they could always theoretically make things more efficient. Yes, of course. Given my role as the CEO of this business, Hit Subscribe, if people come to me, sorry, I have a lot of very itchy stuff going on. I need to trim my beard. I don't mean to keep scratching in my face here. But as the CEO of Hit Subscribe, if you were to come to me and say, hey, there are people reporting to you and their lives could be more efficient, I would say, yeah, I'm sure that's true. The reason I don't, the reason I wouldn't commission something like that or worry about it right on the surface isn't that I'm unaware that things could be more efficient. It's also that I'm aware that I would need to spend time working on somebody or working with somebody on discovery. I would need to do a brain dump of past decisions that have been made. To commission somebody to do work, even to make something more efficient, it isn't just you wave a wand and they get started. You have to engage with them. You have to do some knowledge transfer. You have to kind of lay a bunch of things out, get them up and running and at speed, aware of previous decisions you've made, aware that maybe you've dismissed some tools in the past for reasons they're not going to be privy to. So it isn't just a simple value proposition of like, oh, things can be more efficient. So the reason I'm mentioning that a lot of software engineers tend to think in those terms is because it's kind of out of the gate a thinking hurdle that you have to clear, that there are more reasons that a business won't engage in some kind of improvement than simply they're not aware that this could be done. Usually they are aware that it could be done. So if you've got two business systems that aren't talking to each other, people involved are probably aware that in theory they could be. If you've got a bunch of homegrown spreadsheets that are painful to use, people might continue to use them even though it's painful, not because they're unaware that something better could exist. It's more that they just don't view it as a high priority in the moment. They probably have other fish to fry, or they don't want to invest the time in bringing someone in and accompanying them on that discovery process to make that happen. So all this is to say that in the business you're in right now, well, probably not anymore. I mean, this was written to me, I imagine, 3-4 years ago, but in the business that you're, hypothetically in, if I were to go back in time and record this in more timely fashion, it has been identified as a critical pain. They've actually created a role to address this. So in this context, yes, it's a pain that they want to alleviate. But in other contexts, if you were to go to another business in similar situation with similar immature back office stuff going on and spreadsheets and all that, they might not perceive it as an immediate pain. Yeah, sure, I get that it could be more efficient, but I got other stuff going on. We got a conference coming up and, Susan in accounting just quit, and that's a much bigger problem that I have right now. And they might not even be wrong about those things. So that's really what you have to understand, is that when you bring this to other businesses, it could start to be a vitamin rather than a painkiller that you're offering. And when I'm talking to people about niches, and about what kind of businesses to start and what kind of services to offer. This is a metaphor that I find myself mentioning a lot, especially with people with a background in software. So the idea is when you're selling something, when you have an offering, you could put offerings into sort of one of two buckets, vitamins or painkillers. A painkiller is, and the metaphor this is based on is, let's say that you have a headache and it's horrible. You don't need to be convinced of the merits of a painkiller. You're fully aware of the value proposition of the painkiller. You're definitely willing and able to purchase it and to apply it. So all that you really need to be convinced if you're going to purchase and take a painkiller, you just need to believe that the painkiller in question is going to work. You don't need to be convinced of the benefit to you of relieving the pain. So when you're selling a painkiller type offering, it's going to be something like, if your website is down and somebody comes along and says, hey, I could get this back up and running, the value proposition is obvious. If you, due to inefficient accounting last quarter had, $10,000 in spoilage and somebody could come in and clean that up for you, the value proposition is obvious. When you're talking about painkillers, there's no real sale that needs to be done of the concept, just of you as the service provider. Contrast that with vitamins, and what this is based on, this metaphor, is the idea that if I'm trying to sell you vitamins, like, hey, I have this multivitamin and you really ought to take it because you'll get all your iron and all this other stuff, I have to convince you not only to buy the vitamin from me and to trust me, but that for some reason you have a problem that my vitamin solves. You don't, at the time that I come up to you, perceive that you have a problem. I have to first convince you that you have a problem, and then I have to secondarily convince you that you should also buy this vitamin from me. Now, the guys at the Tropical MBA in their podcast, I've heard them refer to this kind of as the knowledge gap versus the efficiency gap. And the efficiency gap corresponds to the painkiller. So you understand the value proposition, you understand what should happen, you just can't officially implement it. The knowledge gap is, I'm not even aware that there is a better world out there. So a good way to think of this that I think I've talked about in the past is, imagine that you have a mom and pop pizza place in town and they don't currently have a website. You could go to them and try to convince them that they could offer online ordering. And if they just had a website, like, they would get the word out, their marketing would get better. So many things would be great. You have to first convince them it's a vitamin type of offering. You have to first convince them of the merits of this idea, and then you have to sell the merits of the idea and then sell your services. Now, I am not really a fan of vitamin offerings because you kind of expend all your capital convincing them that your offering category is even valid. And when you have a vitamin sale, you're going to have some of the most naturally skeptical customers if they don't see results right away. So if you talk the mom and pop pizza place into town into spending $5,000 on a website, and they're not immediately seeing orders flooding in, they're going to demand their money back and they're going to hate you because they are already out on a limb. You came along, their life was fine before you started selling them websites, and now they've spent all this money and they have nothing to show for it. Even if that's perfectly unreasonable to expect, even if you did tell them it would take 6 months, they're not going to remember that. They're just going to be upset with you. So that is a kind of lengthy detour into the idea of selling vitamins versus painkillers, but it's an important one because right at the moment, this idea of, I'm going to clean up the spreadsheets, I'm going to connect your CRM to your accounting software, all of that threatens to be a vitamin in other businesses, and you really need to trace it through to a painkiller. So in terms of what I would suggest to make this a potentially viable niche, I think you're really on the right track in your question here. Should I go and talk to VPs or COOs or whoever of similar companies? Yes, that is absolutely the right step. Go into those calls, do market research, do discovery with them. And what you really want to get at is, what is actually the problem? Because the fact that they have spreadsheets and it could be more efficient, that's an easy thing for a software engineer to over-index on. Oh, it's inefficient. I could make this quicker. I could make this more accurate. Yes, that's a given. And anybody that you're talking to that's a savvy executive will know that. They won't need you to tell them that things could be better. What you really want to start to understand here is, start with your current job. What is this inefficiency, this inaccurate data actually preventing the business from doing? So, for instance, if the idea is the sales data and the accounting data are not connected, and you can't really like trace through revenues to accounting, it might be that this prevents the sales organization from implementing commissions, because it's maybe unknowable how many sales can be attributed to which sales reps or what have you. So a sales department that couldn't implement commissions, they might have trouble bringing in competitive or bringing in good talent, because the salespeople that are good want competitive commission compensation packages, and these businesses can't offer that because of the lack of traceability in these systems. It could also be that maybe they're having budgets that are off because the budgets are based on like flawed accounting data. So whatever the case may be, that's really what you want to discover. So you want to identify situations where this is true, and you want to get to a more concrete business problem than an executive saying it's really painful to deal with all these spreadsheets. I mean, sure, but a lot of things about work are painful. That doesn't mean it's actually an expensive problem. But why did your employer, and why might other employers want to solve this problem? What is this data gap preventing them from doing? What kind of critical problems is it causing? What kind of blowups has it caused, in the C-suite over the last few years? What kind of misunderstandings has it caused? That's really what you want to drive at. So you want to get a list of, you could ask questions like, let's say that these systems were connected and you had flawless data. What would you do that you're not currently doing today? Or what sort of problems have cropped up because of this over the last few years, business problems, and how much have they cost you? So ask a series of questions along those lines and see what you can get those people to say, and then start to look for patterns. So is it, budgeting problems? Is it the lack of, or what was I talking about before, the inability to compensate salespeople properly, et cetera. So, form kind of a list of those and then look for patterns. And then once you've started to identify those patterns, you can funnel those back into your market research calls and ask on other such calls, hey, are you having this pattern even if they don't bring it up? Or sorry, are you having this issue even if they don't bring it up? And once you start to do that, now you've got a pretty clear line from what you can do, what you can bring into the organization and fix, and then tracing it to an actual business problem. And that business problem, by the way, is going to be of the painkiller variety, not the vitamin variety. So going into a business and saying, you're using spreadsheets and you don't have HubSpot hooked up to QuickBooks, that's only, you would have to luck out for that to be a painkiller situation for them. Most likely they would say like, yeah, but who cares? But if you're coming in and saying, hey, are you losing business to other organizations that are able to bring in better salespeople? Because you can actually trace that through to this problem of not hooking up these systems. It's going to be easier to get their attention. Because another thing is, when businesses are having actual business problems rather than just automation efficiencies internally, it gets easier to recognize that from the outside in. So you could take a look at their sales folks and other people's sales folks. Like, there are ways that you as an outsider could probably get a read on that information even before engaging with them in any way. And that would let you reach out to potential buyers in a much more effective way. I can see from the outside that you might have this problem. Is that true? If so, I know how to fix it. So yeah. I would summarize by saying I definitely think that this is a promising niche opportunity. I think you just need to get a little bit more specific about it, as you're already looking to do with these discovery calls, so you're certainly on the right track. The main thing I would advise is just making sure that you are tracing those operational inefficiencies that you're cleaning up back to whatever actual critical business problems they're contributing to or causing, because that's really going to be your niche, is addressing those critical business problems. So hopefully that is interesting and helpful for some of you out there watching, and I will catch you next time.